Today I'm rehabbing a vintage Coach clutch 9635, and I thought that we would do this one together because this is one that I'm not going to be bathing, and I've had a request lately from my community to talk about what kind of bag I wouldn't bathe when it comes to vintage Coach. So this is a great example. The exterior that I'm showing you right now doesn't have any kind of bad wear to it. It's a little dry. It's got some nicks, some dings, some marks, some dryness on the piping, especially around the corners and the places on the flap where it bends. This is pretty typical. This is where the leather is being stretched and exposed to the most amount of air and also wear and tear. So we're going to see wear on these areas first. Very common, very typical on all of these vintage Coach style bags. My rule of thumb when it comes to vintage Coach and bathing is I don't bathe any bags that are fragile or super old, that have dry rot or loose stitching. I don't bathe any bags that have multiple materials like leather and cloth, leather, patent leather, leather and jacquard. Any kind of multi-material situation, I will not bathe because the materials will all react differently to water. Some expand, some contract. You could get puckering and pulling at seams. That's just not something I will submerge in water. And then I will also not bathe vintage Coach bags that come to my possession in relatively good condition, like this convertible clutch that I'm showing you today. This tag here does not look like it's original to the bag. It looks like it's Vachetta and it hasn't patinaed like the rest of the bag. I may not include that with this bag because it does not look like it belongs. The turn lock as well looks very good condition, almost new, frankly. It could be that this bag was just not used very much, because once you see inside, you'll see that it is in amazing condition. So I don't have to do anything to this lock, I think, which is great. Anytime we can do less work, the better for the business, right? I'm a reseller. I'm flipping all of my vintage Coach finds on my Poshmark and Vintage Coach Collective marketplace on District. You can find the links to those in my link tree, which should be in the description below, or in my profile page if you're watching this on a different platform. So I'm going to take this paper stuffing out that I put in just to show you the condition of the inside of the flap and the inside of the bag itself. It really has like nothing in the crevices, no like detritus. Usually there's dirt and stuff down in those seams. And this bag is very clean. The white that you're seeing is where they have skived the leather in order to stitch it together. So skiving is a process that the edges of the leather pattern pieces go through so that they can thin down the thickness at that point, which is why you see the white, because at this time they didn't have leather technology that would dye through all the way. So you're seeing the white that the hide was before they dyed it, and they run it through a machine that thins out a little piece of the edge so that they can stitch it together. And here's a really good example in the corner. See how thick those two pieces of leather are? And they were able to stitch it together using their nylon or polyester threads. That is how they're able to do it. If they don't thin out the edges of the leather, it's just too thick for the machines to go through. So that is the white that you see. It's not a flaw. It is just how people work with leather, how they've worked with leather for many years in order to stitch it together. Because these are machine stitched and not hand stitched. If you were hand stitching it, maybe you could stitch through really, really, really thick leather if you pre-punch your holes. But that's not the case with these bags. Beautiful Creed stamp here, made in New York City. This is pre-1994, so the style number is not in the serial number. The serial number doesn't mean anything to us anymore because it's from before 1994. After 1994, they started putting the actual style numbers of the bags into the serial number. We also get the month it was made, the factory it was made, and the year that it was made. But for this bag, it's not. We also see a contrasting black zipper on the interior pocket, and this is just something I've personally noticed on bags from the 80s and a few from the early 90s as well. Here is the inside of the front pocket. You do have an impression of the back grommet of the turn lock there, but that's very normal. Again, not something I consider a flaw. You see it on all the bags that have turn locks. It's just from that piece of metal that they have to punch through on that front piece so that the turn lock can function. The other reason I would consider bathing a vintage coach bag that was made from the same material, not multiple materials, same material only, if it wasn't old or fragile, and if it wasn't super dirty inside, is for the shape. Because bathing the bag does help you restore the shape completely to the bag. This one doesn't have too bad of a misshaping. It's a little bit squashed on the bottom and the sides, but we can fix that with a traditional spa cleaning. So let's go over the plan for this bag's rehab. First, I'm going to start with a cleaning product. I like Lexol. I'll use my horsehair brush and a little bit of water and clean the exterior pieces of the bag, including the strap. Then I'm going to hit it up with some leather CPR while it's still damp, let it all dry, and then potentially hit it again with another application of leather CPR. And then I'm going to finish off with a leather conditioner. This is going to be our protection cream. It's going to help repel dirt and water and any kind of wear in the future. And then if there's any particularly dry areas, I will do a little bit of this Black Rock Leather Enrich. A little goes a long way, and it's very, very deeply conditioning to the leather. It really restores a lot of moisture. For the hardware, we're going to be working with some Brasso. This is fairly easy to find. I believe it's sold at Home Depot and Walmart and places like that. And then I also have a nail buffer that I use just for hardware that has all the different buffing levels. I love using this for getting the hardware super shiny and buffed. So that's the plan. Let's get into this rehab. So even though we're not submerging this bag to clean it, we're going to be cleaning the exterior with water, and we're still using water to clean the bag and also to reshape it to its original shape so it can hold its shape without anything inside. So first, I'm going to go ahead in with the Lexol, just like you would using saddle soap, although I'm really moving away from saddle soap personally in my rehabs. It's just not the best product out there anymore, especially for these types of bags. Now, I want to pause here and give you a close-up of what's happening on the leather. You see all these dark spots and marks and scratches appear. That's totally normal, particularly on bags that are of a light color. So this is the British tan color. It's what I would consider a lighter color, and this is always going to happen when you apply water to these lighter colored vintage coach bags. It's just where the water starts to seep in first to the leather skin. And this is all going to dry completely normal, as you'll see. But I know to people who don't rehab often or maybe new to rehabbing, they might start this process and freak out when they see this kind of reaction on the leather and think that they've ruined their bag, but they definitely have not. And you're going to see this is going to happen on every part of the bag that I clean anytime I apply water. And I actually kind of like this effect because it really gives me a visual cue that the leather hasn't been fully and evenly saturated. So I may actually even go back a couple of times over an area to get it all dark, kind of on the relatively the same level, and make sure that I've applied the same amount of moisture to every part of the bag. If you're new to rehabbing vintage coach bags or leather rehab in general, I want you to think of this process like a skincare routine. Just like when you put together a skincare routine for your face, you start off with a cleanser and an exfoliator, and then you move on to a moisturizer, and then maybe some kind of a finishing serum or spray. That's the same approach that I have towards leather rehab, and I think it's really helpful for people who don't do this often to think about it in that way, because leather really is skin, and so we are still approaching it with a skincare kind of mentality. Now, as you see me moving panel to panel, area to area on the bag, I am making sure that I thoroughly saturate the panel with the water from the brush. That is how we are going to be reshaping this bag. You'll notice that the bag is stuffed when I do this, and that's really important because the stuffing is what's holding the panels out in the shape that we want, and the water is what is entering and penetrating the leather skin and allowing it to expand and then contract around our stuffing. So it's giving us the shape that we want without submerging the bag. People are pretty scared to use water on their leather, and I really just want to ameliorate your concerns right now, especially with vintage Coach bags. These leathers are very high quality. They can take wear and tear, they can take moisture, they can take a beating, and they can actually come back looking amazing, as you'll see in my other rehabs and this rehab today. Leather is a product that's been around for many, many hundreds of years for a reason, for its durability, for its ability to last through time, to take wear and tear. So just keep that in mind when you're working on these bags, when they were made in a time when leather was still very good quality all around. Nowadays, we have all kinds of different qualities, all kinds of different finishes. A lot of leathers are finished with plastic coatings like patent leather or acrylic paints, and they react differently. They have different needs, but these bags from the early 90s, from the 80s and the 70s, they are from a time when it truly was very good quality leather to be found everywhere in the market, and they didn't have the cheap things that they have implemented today in order to save on cost. You can see as I move through the bag as well that it's drying pretty rapidly. Even the front is already drying quite thoroughly. So again, don't worry about putting water on your vintage Coach leather bags. They can take it. We're moving on to step 2, which is our deep conditioning moisturization step in our skincare process and our leather rehab process. And we're using leather CPR to do this. One of my favorite products to have on hand. It works on a wide variety of products. It really brings back the moisture and the suppleness to leathers that are absorbent or semi-absorbent. Not for use on suede or nubuck, of course. That's a totally different finish to the leather. But this is great for these semi-absorbable leathers that Coach used in the 80s and early 90s. Make sure you get this on all the areas that are dry, all the areas that are exposed to high hand traffic or touch traffic, all the areas that get a lot of exposure to air. I like to put a nice thick coating on and then kind of move it around different areas of the bag if it's too thick. And you don't have to wear gloves with this product. I like to just use my hands because it helps me get around all the piping and all the nooks and crannies, but you absolutely can apply this with a rag or a sponge or with your hand that is gloved if you choose to do that. No problems there, but it is non-toxic. It is totally fine to use your hand if you wish. Now, this is a really important step because if you just cleaned your bag with the Lexol soap and didn't moisturize it, it could start to dry out and get stiff. This is true for any cleaner, so you've got to follow up with a moisturizer. And with leather CPR, I like to do an application while the bag is still damp and then let it completely dry through, reassess, and then decide if I want to do a second application. And then you've got to let it rest in between applications. How long? Until you feel that it's not wet anymore, maybe like an hour or two, or up to a full day if you have the time to do that. The leather needs to rest in between applications. You can see that this product is almost re-wetting the leather, and this is again also going to help reshape this bag, which is again why we're doing this with the stuffing inside the bag. I'm going to get under the flap now as well, and eventually I'll also do in the interior pocket and in the pocket under the flap. Now, we're going to let some time go by because, again, we need this to fully set and absorb into the leather. And here we are the next day. It's already looking so good. All those nicks and scratches have gone away, and she's looking so hydrated and just vibrant and lustrous. But we're not done yet. I'm actually going to go ahead and do another application of leather CPR to make sure that I get all the binding and all the inner pockets, and I will then buff with a horsehair brush in between as well to get the product inside the pores of the leather. This will also help buff out any marks or scratches that are superficially on the exterior of the leather. Next, I moved on to a second pass of leather CPR where I'm really focusing on the binding, especially on the inner part of the bag, making sure that that's all getting super hydrated and moisturized with leather CPR. This is totally optional, but I like to do this extra step to make sure that all the areas that tend to get dry and show wear are really moisturized and in good condition when the buyer receives the bag. The condition of the bag is really important. You want to try to get your bag in the best condition possible so you can sell at the top market price or as close to that as possible. The next day, I'm reevaluating the exterior of the bag, and she looks so fantastic, so improved from where we started, and a lot of her marks and nicks and dryness are completely gone. I'm going to pull out the insert of paper that I created, and I'm going to just do a little CPR treatment on the back inner pocket. I did work on the strap off camera. That's not particularly interesting, but don't forget to moisturize your straps. We're going to work on this back panel here with just a little bit of CPR. Don't forget to do this if the style you're working on has a back pocket or other kinds of pockets inside of it. You just want to make sure that you use the leather CPR on all the finished areas of the leather. And remember, leather CPR is not for suede and not for nubuck. So you won't see me apply it to the underside of the flap or the front inner wall or anything like that on this bag, just the finished areas. Make sure that this piece of leather continues to stay moisturized and supple for years to come. All right, we skipped a little bit ahead here and we're all done with that inner pocket. So we're going to replace the stuffing and let this sit. And while that is sitting, we are going to work on the hardware pieces. There's not a ton of hardware on this bag. I do just want to clean up the dog clips on the straps a little bit. They're looking a little bit tarnished. The turn lock looks great, so I'm not even going to touch that. And then I will touch up the D-rings on the sides of the bag just a little bit. But really, it's just these dog clips that I think need the most work. I'm using a makeup tool here. It's like a silicone tipped makeup tool, which I don't use for makeup. I use for rehabbing bags. You'd be surprised how many items in the beauty aisle actually could work for these rehab scenarios. So here I have a little beauty cotton pad that I'm just rubbing on all the areas where I put the brasso and just giving it a nice little buff and polish and just working the brasso out of all the nooks and crannies on these dog clips. Take your time. Polishing hardware is not the funnest part of the experience for me, but it does make a big difference and helps these pieces last longer as well. There's other products you could have used, like a jewelry polishing cloth. I've seen people use other polishing mediums like Peak or Wizard. Those are all fine too. Brasso is just what I have on hand. Sometimes I switch to a Q-tip to, again, get into those hard to reach areas. And you can also rinse with water if you find that you just can't get all of it out and the Q-tip isn't doing it for you. Just make sure you dry really thoroughly immediately after you do that. I had a lot more footage of me doing this, but you're going to start to see me skip ahead now for sake of time. It's not the most interesting footage, and I kind of just keep repeating what I've already said in the footage. But I thought we'd talk again briefly about pricing and the condition of the vintage Coach bag that you're selling. I just see so many listings out there that are priced so wildly compared to the condition of the bag. And condition is really important when you are pricing your bag. You could have a really desirable item, but if the condition is poor, it's going to bring down the price. Here's the final result. I think it came out fantastic. She looks almost new, at least as close as new as she did when she actually was new. You're also going to see that her shape is now holding up so much better on its own with no stuffing inside. That was the result that we were going for. And she wasn't too misshapen to begin with. So that's why we were able to achieve this with the spa cleaning method that we use today. Again, this bag will be available for sale in my Poshmark closet and my district marketplace called Vintage Coach Collective. Link is in the profile page or the description of this post. And if you like this content, consider following my account, consider subscribing to my YouTube channel if you're on YouTube, or to my IG subscription on Instagram. And if you're on TikTok, you can find some of the products that I use in my TikTok shop, or you can head to the link in my profile on all channels and check out my link tree, which is linked to my Amazon storefront. And you can find all the products that I recommend for coach rehabs, leather rehabs, cleaning linings, recommendations for products with mold and spew, and of course, my favorite reselling tools and products to use in my business. Thanks so much for watching. I'll catch you in the next one, and happy thrifting.